Chapter 2 Shadowlands. Despite the appearance of current peace and the forlorn hope that the world was returning to some kind of normality, all four sets of eyes were focused on the path ahead. After all, this was the place where the rumblings of war always struck first, where the Drucky raids always inevitably restarted. All seemed quiet enough, the scattered series of islands almost peaceful. Well, in the aesthetics perhaps, but never in the all-encompassing consciousness of the High Elven people. As they arrived at the outskirts of Toran Rock, the largest of the many islands, Elandrian pointed out the slightest of movements, so camouflaged that Yeasir would easily have missed it. Relaying the information to the young elven noble with caution, he was surprised that instead the noble strangely had excitement, and it was palpable. "Let's take a closer look," whispered Yeasir, his voice unnecessarily quiet, perhaps giving away his fear, for they were both far out of earshot at that present moment, still being relatively high in altitude. "Very well, but we aren't getting too close. You don't want a body full of crossbow bolts if they are Drucky bandits. As a matter of fact, neither would I, if you don't mind." Elandrian's voice changed to a well-rehearsed tune, having to both sound assertive and subservient at the same time. As they flew ever nearer to the ongoing movement that was disturbing the melancholic stillness of the bleak, desolate rocks, the elves, for they clearly now were elves, were about 7 in number, and surrounded by tents with a small fire in the middle, with which they were currently sat around. For it was quite cold this far off the coastline, especially during winter, and despite ancient magics attempting to keep the islands warm, there was definitely a cold feel to them, both producing and maintaining their effectiveness. They once again flew past, slightly lower this time, and saw that the campsite had been well chosen for those not wishing to be seen. It was hidden below a rocky overhang and could only be spotted from above. Even then, with great difficulty. Small wisps of black smoke, like the tentacles of some ghostly apparition, were fading into the sky above, being the only giveaway of their presence. Around the fire pit, the 7 elves sat, and it became clear that for all of Yeasir and Elandrian's attempted subtleness, they had long been spotted by the group. At the briefest of glances, you might have mistaken them for a small band of Drucky raiders in hiding. Their clothing was dark, a black cape and dark blue jerkin, particularly covering their light chainmail armour. They were clearly dressed for combat, yet they didn't wear the typical bright whites and blues of the High Elven military. Their faces also were out of character, for they were grim and had a hardened anger about them, an anger that was verging on hatred. However, knowing these lands like Yeasir did, he had the ability to instantly realise that these elves were more friend than foe. These were tough, brutal elves, wild elves, and their hearts had been consumed by hatred. Yet they channeled this hatred only to their dark kin across the sea. All High Elves hated the Dark Elves, but their hatred bordered on total obsession. It totally consumed their lives. Yeasir gave them a wave as they once again flew overhead. He wasn't really expecting any kind of response in kind, but surprisingly, one of the group gave him the slightest of nods and the slightest of smirks, which turned the corners of his lips. He couldn't help but feel a little proud, for these elves were not known for their hospitality. Despite receiving only the briefest exchange, Aesir had a part of his soul that longed to land and spend some real time amongst them. Elandrian, as if reading his master's thoughts, quickly changed direction. These were shadow warriors. They would not entertain a Tiranoki noble, especially an excitable lad who had yet to come of age. "We are already late. Your mother will be angry," said Elandrian, "and not just at you." And before another word could be uttered between them, he began the trip home back to Tiranoc.